We've got tons of hardware news to talk about today because we have the PlayStation 5 Pro being announced today, which is interesting. And as we're a PC-focused channel, that also means that there's AMD hardware inside of the PS5 Pro, which we now have, more officially confirmed information about. But also we have more interviews with AMD's Jack Huyn, and this kind of expands on some stuff I was talking about in my last video, where I talked about AMD abandoning the high end to chase more scalability, trying to get a larger market share, and that information was an interview with Jack Huyn, an AMD vice president, and published here at Tom's Hardware. All my sources will be in the video description today, and we have some other topics to talk about today as well, but I really want to get into this because this is talking about the death of RDNA and CDNA, but that's in order to give birth to UDNA, a unified GPU architecture, which would then no longer have a split between the gaming products of RDNA graphics cards and the more compute-oriented data center products with CDNA. And that split had taken place a while back. Now, it had pros and cons. There was a reason they chose to split it, and the idea is that you could get more micro-optimizations for your different use cases to target those separately. However, it puts an additional burden on developers who are planning on, supporting AMD products. And this kind of relates to what Jack Huyn was talking about in the previous video, where we talked about chasing more of that scalability. One of the reasons to want to have the larger market share, in addition to just, hey, more money comes with selling more stuff, is because it's going to be easier to get developers on board for optimizations and just overall support if you have that larger market share. But additionally, another thing making things difficult for developers for the AMD support side of things is this split between the RDNA GPUs and the CDNA GPUs. Which ones are you targeting your work for? And having that split does make things more complicated. And so moving to a unified UDNA architecture could make it easier to get developers on board, which really seems to be what Jack Huyn is incredibly focused on. Because right now, if you compare this to the NVIDIA side of things, where they've had their CUDA, which I think the U in CUDA is also unified. The idea there being that their data center products, their consumer GPUs, all of that you can program using CUDA, and it's kind of supporting all of that. Is where a lot of this comes from. Now, anyway, enough on my thoughts on the headline. Let's actually get into the direct quotes from Jack Huyn talking about this. So he's saying, direct quote, "So part of a big change at AMD today is we have a CDNA architecture for our Instinct data center GPUs and RDNA for the consumer stuff. It's forked. Going forward, we will call it UDNA. There will be one unified architecture, both Instinct and client." That's the consumer. So, you probably buying your GPU to go in your gaming PC, will unify it so that it will be so much easier for developers versus today. Again, that seems to be the key focus on all of this. Easier for developers versus today, where they have to choose and value is not improving. So the big focus here seems to be software support, developers integration, make things easy for them. Anyway, he says we forked it because then you get the sub-optimizations and the micro-optimizations, again, for the split platform, for gaming and for compute, data center workloads optimized separately. Cool. But then it's very difficult for these developers, especially as we're growing our data center business. So now we need to unify it. That's been a part of it, because remember what I said earlier. Now, I think he's referring back to what I was saying in that previous interview, where all of this was probably happening at the same time. Now Tom's Hardware is publishing it in multiple articles. Anyway, talking about the scalability. He says, I'm talking about millions of developers. Now, notice this, guys. He's not talking about millions of GPUs sold. He's talking about millions of developers working on software, right? That's where we want to get to. Step one is to get to the hundreds, then thousands, then tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and hopefully one day millions. That's what I'm telling the team right now. It's that scale we have to build now. Now, interestingly, later in this article, Tom's Hardware, without a direct quote from Jack, says that, as part of this conversation, he was mentioning that NVIDIA's CUDA does have millions of developers working on it. So that's where AMD wants to get. So I think this is really positive because AMD can develop, the greatest hardware in the world, but if it doesn't have as good of software support for it, then people will still choose to buy a product that does have that smoother software integration for, their needs, especially if we're talking about professional use cases. Anyway, so I think this is a really good focus. Anyway, Tom's Hardware follows up with the question, so with UDNA bringing those architectures back together, will all of that still be backward compatible with the RDNA and the CDNA split? Now, Jack Quinn's response to that is, so one of the things we want to do is, we made some mistakes with the RDNA side. Each time we change the memory hierarchy, the subsystem, it has to reset the matrix on optimizations. I don't want to do that. So going forward, we're thinking about not just RDNA 5, RDNA 6, RDNA 7, but UDNA 6 and UDNA 7. We plan the next 3 generations. Why is my head so big? Hopefully I haven't been covering up a bunch of this interview the whole time. Anyway, we plan the next 3 generations because once we get the optimizations, I don't want to have to change the memory hierarchy and then we lose a lot of optimizations. So we're kind of forcing that issue about full forward and backward compatibility. We do that on Xbox today. It's very doable, but requires advanced planning. It's a lot more work to do, but that's the direction we're going. So he's talking about how, changing architectures, you lose some optimizations when you change big parts of the system. They don't want to have that happening. So yeah, this focus on keeping those forward-moving optimizations to new architectures, keeping what worked for the previous generations seems to be a major focus, but they're admitting that that's going to be difficult, but not impossible. Now, Tom's Hardware asks, when you bring this back to a unified architecture, this means, just to be clear, a desktop GPU would have the same architecture as an MI300X equivalent in the future, correct? And he says it's a cloud-to-client strategy. So what I'm taking that as meaning their data center might be the focus, because guys, if we're being real here, for AMD as well as for NVIDIA, the big money is in data center. So I think their idea here is that focus on the data center chips and then find a way to scale that down to make sense for the client, the end consumer, the person buying their gaming PC GPU. He says, I think this will allow us to be very efficient too. So instead of having 2 teams to do it, you have 1 team. It's not doing something that's that crazy, right? We forked it because we wanted to micro-optimize in the near term, but now that we have scale, we have to unify back. And I believe it's the right approach. There might be some little bumps. So I want to kind of comment on this. So here's where I feel like what we're really talking about here maybe is kind of the death of RDNA. In other words, right now they've got, again, that split. You've got to focus on data center, you've got to focus on gaming, and they're not the same thing. Whereas this sounds more like they want to throw the whole team, everybody at the data center, at cloud, and then make that as good as possible, because that's where the money's at, but then still try to be able to cut that down to make a good gaming product as well for the client side. And so there might be some little bumps. So I'm wondering if, I don't know. I'm hopeful that this doesn't mean the gaming products are less optimized for gaming, which again could be what ends up happening out of this. Although my other thought process though is, as I understand it, CDNA has had more like tensor operation acceleration in it. Whereas, in other words, for good AI workloads and things like that, they've got that in there sooner than RDNA has. So perhaps if what we're wanting for future AMD GPUs is better, AI upscaling or something like that, right? Things along those lines. Perhaps going, to GPUs that would have more of that focus from the, AI and data center end, and then getting that into their consumer GPUs might end up being a good thing for that style of, optimization anyway. But back to the interview, we do have one more question here. So this merging back together, how long will it take? How many more product generations before we see that? So we're trying, in other words, they're trying to get at, so are we going to see this immediately? When is this going to happen? Is RDNA 4 dead and we're going to have UDNA instead? Is RDNA 4 still happening? Is this going to be for RDNA 5 being replaced by a UDNA? We'll have to see. Anyway, so what is Jack Quinn's response? We haven't disclosed that yet. So in other words, he's not going to answer that question. It's a strategy. Strategy is very important to me. I think it's the right strategy. We've got to make sure we're doing the right thing. In fact, when we talk to developers, they love it because, again, they have all these other developments telling them to do different things too. So I need to reduce the complexity. From the developer's standpoint, they love this strategy. They actually wish we did it sooner, but I can't change the engine when a plane's in the air. I have to find the right way to set point that so I don't break things. So in other words, what I'm getting at here is they're not going to say when this is happening, but when he says we can't change the engine when a plane's in the air, like when we get a new generation of graphics card, this takes years. That's in the pipeline for a long time before it actually gets on the market and you buy it and it's in your gaming PC. So I think what I might translate that to is RDNA 4 is already in the works and happening. They're not going to just suddenly cancel that in order to produce this immediately, right? So they need to wait for the right set point in like their forward-looking line of things where it could make sense to merge that in without completely derailing stuff that just needs to be moving forward now. That's kind of how I take that, but again, they're not confirming exactly when this is happening, and again, the big focus here seems to be talking about developers. They want this to be easier for software developers so that they can get better software support, and I think especially in the professional side of things, but to some extent the gaming side of things, that lack of equivalent software support to NVIDIA is a big kind of Achilles heel for AMD. So I really think a lot of this is pretty positive. Again, this will be linked in the video description, and Tom's Hardware author has a lot of thoughts, to follow up on this if you want their thoughts on all that. So follow that in the video description. Now also, if we want to hear, when are we going to hear more stuff from AMD? It does look like AMD is holding an Advancing AI event on October 10th. We would expect the debut of, Instinct MI325X AI accelerator, 5th gen EPYC CPUs, and much more. We'll have to see what else is revealed. Could there be some kind of big surprise? Possibly, but we'll have to wait and see. Now, the other massive news today is the PlayStation 5 Pro. If you're more on the console side of things, this is certainly much bigger news than what I started with, but the PlayStation 5 Pro is being announced officially by PlayStation. It is for sure real, and they are focusing on a variety of topics. One thing is some hardware improvements, but the other thing is software improvements. So their bullet points for the big focus here is an upgraded GPU. With the PS5 Pro, we're upgrading to a GPU that has 67% more compute units than the current PS5 console and 28% faster memory. And overall, that would enable 45% faster rendering for gameplay, making the experience much smoother. They're also talking about advanced ray tracing. So we added even more powerful ray tracing that provides more dynamic reflection and refraction of light. This allows the rays to be cast at double and at times triple the speeds of the current PS5 console. And then AI-driven upscaling. We're also introducing PlayStation Spectral Super Resolution, an AI-driven upscaling that uses a machine learning-based technology to provide super sharp image clarity by adding an extraordinary amount of detail. So those are the big focuses for the PS5 console. Of course, that's going to come at a cost. This is going to be expensive. Do they have the dollar amount here? So it looks like it's going to be $700 US, 700 pounds and 800 euros. About 120,000 yen. Also, they are getting a 2 terabyte SSD as well. Looks like it also comes with a copy of Astro's Playroom pre-installed in every PS5 Pro. Anyway, it will come diskless though. So if you want to use disks, you'll have to buy those separately. I think those are around $79, something around there. And it also doesn't come with the vertical stand. So if you want that too, I think that's another like $30. So anyway, altogether, if you wanted the disk drive and stand, this will push it up another $100 to around $800. It's launching on November 7th. And pre-orders will begin from PlayStation on September 26th. But I think they had an update to the front of this website mentioning that, well, it will update directly from pre-orders directly from PlayStation on September 26th. At PlayStation at participating retailers in territories where directplaystation.com isn't available, whereas on October 10th, 2024, pre-orders will be available at all other participating retailers. So, could be a couple of different pre-order dates if you need it. Now, overall, this is pretty interesting because that means that AMD is now launching an SoC that has 60 compute units. That would be the rumored spec, but it also scales along with the 67% more compute units compared to the base PlayStation 5. So that would make sense as 60 compute units. The faster GDDR6 memory, again, giving us that, 27% memory speed uplift. But again, the ray tracing uplifts, notice that it's more than just having more compute units, because if you have 67% more compute units, you would expect your ray tracing performance to maybe be 67% faster at most, right? But they're claiming that the ray tracing could be double or even at times triple the speeds of the current PS5, meaning that there's definitely more ray tracing optimizations than just throwing more compute units at the problem. So this is hinting that AMD really is improving their ray tracing hardware support, at least in what's in the PlayStation 5 Pro version. And again, this PSSR AI upscaling is really interesting. Now, obviously, the hardware that's running this is AMD hardware, because AMD hardware is inside the PlayStation 5. Now, whether the software for PSSR is something that could come to a future version of FSR upscaling that would be AI accelerated, whether there was any kind of deal behind the scenes allowing that to move to the PC, or whether this will be confined to the PlayStation console, is another matter. But for me, I really think that's where AMD hardware in the PC space needs the big improvement. I think that getting an AI upscaling technique that is as good as DLSS or better, full stop, not almost as good, but as good or better, is really where AMD needs to be if they want to move to that big scale. This would be absolutely huge, and that might mean you need new hardware that supports that kind of AI upscaling inferencing versus what is currently available. So that might mean dropping the backwards compatibility for older generations, but I kind of hope that's the way AMD goes, because I really do think they need the AI upscaling along the lines of DLSS. Now, is PSSR actually going to be as good as what we're seeing in DLSS or something like that? I mean, we'll have to see once the games are actually out. Now, there's some pretty interesting information coming out with all of this. If you want some more of the details on all of this. Now, I have a lot of questions about the PSSR specifically. So I've been looking to see if there's any additional information beyond what was in the official announcement. I am seeing that there are some claims that PSSR will work across the full library of PS5 games without requiring a specific patch from developers. If you just buy your PS5 Pro, you'll get that support. However, that seems to contradict what was actually said in the announcement, which mentioned that you would need a patch to get the PSSR support into games. There's also mention of support for PSVR 2. Now, I found this in a WCCF Tech article, but it looks like they are taking this information from CNET. So basically, what they're saying is that CNET has talked to PlayStation to get some additional information. And CNET is claiming that PlayStation Super Resolution has been confirmed to work across the full library without game developers having to release a specific PS5 Pro patch. But again, that does seem to contradict what was stated during the actual announcement, where it said feature only available on select PS5 games. So CNET is confidently claiming that this was confirmed to them by someone at PlayStation, but was that person wrong? Did CNET misinterpret it? That's difficult to say, because again, it does look like we now have conflicting information on that topic. It looks like Mark Cerny also confirmed to CNET that, again, PSSR would be eventually coming to PSVR 2 games, but that's not confirmed at this moment. Anyway, this is all pretty exciting stuff, but let's go ahead and move on for the news today, since we're primarily a PC hardware channel rather than console focused. Speaking of AMD software support, though, another place that they've been looking to try to catch up to NVIDIA is NVIDIA's Reflex, where AMD's Anti Lag 2 is basically that kind of direct competitor to NVIDIA's Reflex, but it does need to be directly integrated into games by game developers. Now, to make that easier to do, the Anti Lag 2 SDK is now available at GPUOpen for direct game integration. So now it's going to be easier for game developers to just, go to GPUOpen, get the information on this, and try to integrate it into their games. Now, are they going to do that? Again, that's one of the issues for AMD, where that scalability we were talking about earlier is kind of a big deal. If AMD had a larger market share, then I think game developers would be more motivated to put people on the task of integrating AMD-specific technology into the games. But if they don't have that larger market share, it's going to be probably a lower priority. Whereas it's kind of a chicken and the egg thing, though, right? So, people are going to be less willing to buy AMD products if they feel like they're at a software disadvantage. But then if less people buy them, game developers are less likely to want to integrate the technologies. But the point is, it's at least now available, and hopefully we do start seeing it getting into more games. Now, as far as some AMD technologies that don't require a developer to integrate them, that just run through their own driver software to kind of get around that, that's where we get things like AFMF2, the driver level frame generation. Now, AFMF version 1 is available in AMD's main graphics driver right now for anybody with one of their, I think it's at least the 6000, 7000 series GPUs. However, there's a version 2 of AFMF software with a lot of improvements. However, it's only available in a preview driver right now. However, that preview driver is updated now with a bunch of more recent game optimizations, including optimizations for Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2. So if you've been using the pre-release driver for AFMF2, you might want to update that to the newer version, which has more game optimizations, at least if you're interested in the games that are being more optimized for. Again, the version 2 of AFMF2 is claiming lower latency, better performance, and more tunable settings, which is really nice. In other AMD news, switching over to the CPU side of things, a while back, I announced that the 7600X3D is officially available. It does exist, it is available, but it was a Micro Center exclusive in the United States, suddenly making it unavailable to much of the world. However, it looks like it has also launched at a German retailer for 329 euros. So I would say the biggest downside here is the price, but also it does appear to be exclusive to the single retailer, which I believe is Mind Factory. Yeah, it looks like Mind Factory. So in other words, if you are in Europe, it looks like you might have a chance of getting the 7600X3D, but exclusively from Mind Factory. And again, at 329 euros, At Micro Center, the main advantage was that they offer a lot of bundle deals, which would reduce the overall price. That might make it more interesting. We also have more reviews out now for the 7600X3D to get an idea of the gaming performance. There's a really big review out now from PC Games Hardware, and I will link this in the video description. This article is in German, but I've kind of just Google translated it to English. And they're overall praising the efficiency, but not the price. But also, while its productivity performance isn't great, its gaming performance is pretty good. When you average out all of their gaming tests, It looks like it does beat the 9000 series processors like the 9700X and the 9600X in gaming. Although some Intel CPUs are fairly comparable in gaming performance, at least in this particular test suite of games. The 7800X 3D is faster, but not massively so. It's 9% faster, so if we make this percentage scaling. So it's basically within 9% of the fastest gaming CPU on the market. So it's certainly a good performer here. Now, if you use a different set of games, the positions could change very easily on all of these, but the point is you're within 10% of the top-end gaming chip. So gaming performance is quite good. But again, the price overall is where it kind of has a bit of a downside. Now, in other AMD CPU news, AMD will have Ryzen Z2 Extreme for handhelds coming in early 2025. So they had a Z1 Extreme, which is like what's in your ROG Ally, that kind of thing. So it's unclear at this point which handhelds will choose this and what exactly will make the Z2 Extreme different than AMD's non-handheld focused, offerings. Maybe missing the NPU or something like that. Maybe chasing a better efficiency curve for mobile gaming on a handheld battery. We'll have to see. Also in AMD APU news, we're seeing AMD confirm that Krackan Zen 5 and RDNA 3.5 APU will be released in early 2025 as well. This is also Jack Quinn again, this time talking to Computer Base. The idea with Krackan is this would be the lower end chips that would probably bring down the price on the systems, but still have those NPUs that would support, Copilot eventually once, software is updated and whatnot to get Copilot Plus support officially recognized. In other CPU news, it's looking like there's at least a rumor, so to be clear, this is a rumor, that Intel's Core Ultra 200K series launch is going to be pushed back a week from what was originally reported and would now be scheduled for October 24th. We had originally expected October 17th, and that the official announcement would happen on October 10th. Now, can you delay something that I don't think has even been officially set in stone yet? So rumors are being updated on when to expect the Core Ultra 200 series. And I'll throw out a couple other quick pieces of info, which is we are seeing an RTX 4070 with GDDR6 rather than 6X now actually for sale on Newegg, although availability doesn't seem to actually be in stock yet. But this does mean we can see the price it's being listed at, and it is $570, exactly the same as the GDDR6X version. So if you're not being careful, you're going to pay exactly the same price for a slightly slower chip because it has slightly slower memory. So that's a bit unfortunate. And if you're not careful, these are just listed as basically exactly the same thing, but notice it's a 6 and not a 6X. I'm hoping more AIB partners will more clearly mark that this is a GDDR6 and not 6X product. I know it's in the name, it's a little hard to see. We are seeing that Galax at least does have a big sticker on their card that does say 12 gigabytes GDDR6 right on the front of the box. Now, you would have to know that it's not normally 6 and that they used to be 6X, so it's still not great. I don't know. I just wish it didn't quite have the same name if there is actually different hardware inside. That's unfortunate, but let's go ahead and move on. And just mention that Final Fantasy 16 on PC is coming out very soon. What is it, the 17th, I believe, so a week from now. And they've had a demo version available on PC, which I tested on the day it released. Since my testing, AMD and NVIDIA have released driver support, as well as there have now been 2 patches, the second patch just dropping now. And this new update is specifically calling out fixing stuttering issues, and that these fixes will be applied to the full version. This was one of my main complaints with the demo when it first dropped, was that it did have noticeable stutters on my system. And looking online, a lot of people were reporting stutters, and some people were saying works fine on my system, which I never know if it's not stuttering or they just don't notice stutters. But anyway, apparently these stutters have been officially fixed. Whether or not they've been actually fixed under testing, we'll find out. I am interested in running some more benchmarks on this at some point when I have some time. But anyway, hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Hopefully you found it useful and or interesting. If you want to support the news and benchmarking that I do on the channel, consider hitting the join button down below as the best way to directly support the channel financially. It's amazing for those of you guys who have done that. Huge thank you. You get little like member badges on your comments, early access to some videos. And anyway, huge thank you, but I totally understand not everybody's in a position to do that. No hard feelings. Huge thank you to viewers, subscribers, commenters, everybody. You're all beautiful people, and I hope you all have an excellent day.